Simon Pressley is Managing Director of Propertyology. He's seemed pretty unmoved by the dire predictions about the property market as a whole. He's here with his 2019 property predictions. Simon Pressley, good to have you on our show.
Always good to be here.
Your commentary around the Australian property market as a whole at the moment is really more focused on the outside of those capital cities and some areas that have actually been booming.
Absolutely. Regional Australia doesn't get spoken about much at all, Brooke, but it actually has been performing very strongly. Large parts of regional Australia have performed very strongly throughout 2018, and as far forward as we can anticipate, that will continue. The specific locations will change from year to year, but it's a very exciting story.
Yeah, we've got a couple on screen. Moree Plains, I mean, 28%. I haven't heard lately of any locations 28%, but there they are. Bor, Launceston. I think we've heard a little bit about that Tasmanian market because that has been a standout overall. The others?
Yeah, I mean, there's a combination of some coastal lifestyle locations like Kiama. Noosa, you know, tourism is strong, but its economy is also diversified. Launceston, Bor, Moree Plains is an agriculture story, but a story that probably hasn't been told is regional tourism. You know, we're in the Asian century. Our tourism sector's been exceptionally strong and will for many, many years yet, but they're not just coming to Sydney and Melbourne. It's a 1 hour flight to large parts of regional Australia, and that's making our regional economies very, very strong, which is buoying these property markets.
Yeah, you've got, you know, roughly kind of 12 places that you've noticed have more than 7% growth. So there's definitely been some movement there. Obviously, a lot of the big predictions that we do see in the media and talk about in the media, for obvious reasons, are around Sydney and Melbourne.
Yep.
Given some of the issues raised by Martin North, you know, and which seem a world away from this kind of stuff that we've got on our screen, but how do you see the things like the lending issues and the very tight credit conditions that we've got, the issues around, you know, the refinancing that he was talking about, mortgage stress? Does that factor at all in your forecast for next year? For
mortgage stress is overstated. There will always be mortgage stress. You know, some people will manage their money better than others, but APRA is a significant issue. In my opinion, it's a knee-jerk reaction to what's going on in the Royal Commission. Definitely there's some issues there that need to be addressed, but I don't agree with how it's being addressed. It's the Brooke Courties of the country that are being punished at the moment by not being, you know, given loans that should be given loans. Now, that's not the way to hand out punishment. Yeah,
which we've talked about a lot. It's just this kind of the pendulum swinging too far the wrong way, and things like dogs and cats being included in expenses, you know, sheets, where really that's just crazy stuff. This is a key chart to explain what you think is important for the Sydney and Melbourne markets specifically. Talking about housing supply. Why is that such a big issue for you?
Yeah, well, housing supply, I guess, drags down property prices if we build too much, Brooke. So this is looking at the local city council of Ryde, you know, Macquarie Park, those sort of areas. This is, I guess, a normal level of housing supply for this particular local government authority. But we've been warning people for a couple of years before now that this level of supply here is quite a lot, you know, more than what that market is normally used to. And when you see this sort of level here, that's a lot more supply than what this market means. Yeah. So when you've got, you know, way more dwellings out there than what the broader population requires, you are going to get some significant declines in property values. Now, Ryde, we've seen property values come back by about 14%.
Yes. And
the vacancy rates have gone from about 1 to 1.5% normally, up at about 4% now.
And so you think this is the kind of picture which is then dragging down the overall picture, basically?
Yeah, and there's pockets right throughout Sydney. This is probably the more extreme example, but there's pockets right throughout Sydney like this, and also parts of Melbourne as well. Now what's being built here in, say, 2016 will typically get built in 2018 or 2019. So you've still got all this to wash through the system yet. So that's going to create a drag on property prices in Sydney and Melbourne for a couple of years as yet.
Okay, and obviously the lending restrictions, you know, what's happened from the Banking Royal Commission, that's a big part of it. So are you just staying away from Sydney and Melbourne completely, or are you still seeing pockets of interest?
Sydney, Melbourne and Darwin are the no-go zones for all property investors, and perhaps for several years yet. Growth cycles don't come around very often, Brooke, you know, typically 10 years or so. But right throughout the rest of Australia, there's a lot more positive stuff that we really do need to be talking about. Yeah,
the jobs boom that is a central part of your 2019 forecast I was quite interested in.
Yeah.
This is kind of a boom, and as we can see from this chart again, I mean, this goes from 2008 here, GFC era, stimulus package, right through to kind of 2017, 2018, where you are up that end.
Yeah.
We've had that boom. So how do you see that affecting the property market 2019? Why is that so central to your view of things?
Well, in amongst this is 200,000 jobs created outside of our capital city. That's an enormous amount of jobs.
Yep.
The chart we had up there earlier about parts of regional Australia that are really, really strong, I'd say booming markets, that's benefited from this. We expect this sort of trend to continue for as far forward as we can anticipate. We already have very low interest rates. We're anticipating wage growth will come with the rider that someone needs to give APRA a bit of a clip and allow credit to be responsible and sensible again. But there's free trade agreements that are going to have a big benefit for the Australian economy. There's a tourism boom that's got $44 billion worth of projects in the pipeline. Australia's mining sector is about to kick off again in a really big way. So Queensland, Western Australia, parts of South Australia, Tasmania are going to benefit from that. So we expect this to continue to go up, and that's going to be one of the strong fundamentals for property markets.
Okay, so none of that sounds like a doom and gloom picture.
Absolutely not.
But that means we also got to get very specific about the areas that you like. So if we can show people some of the locations that you actually think will be doing very well in coming years. We're looking at, well, if you look kind of overall Australia, in Victoria you've signalled out Ballarat and Bendigo. In New South Wales you're looking at Wagga Wagga, Parkes, Orange, Bathurst, Dubbo, Armidale. Queensland, we've got Sunshine Coast, Mackay, Townsville, Toowoomba, Albany and Esperance in WA, just some of the ones you like, Launceston and Devonport, and I haven't got it on there, but South Australia, Mount Gambier, Mount Barker, Whyalla.
Yep.
Let's just focus on a couple of those. What do you think is worth mentioning with a few minutes left?
Well, look, all of these locations, perhaps Parkes is on the small side.
Actually, one of our producers in our newsroom is from Parkes, and she was cheering to see Parkes. She said, oh my gosh, what is it about Parkes? But, you know, she's been there her whole life. What is it about Parkes? Come on, tell us.
It's an agriculture story. You know, I'm sure everyone's heard the term Australia is Asia's food bowl. That's just starting. The free trade agreements that I mentioned earlier.
It's not a new story either, right?
It's huge.
Okay.
From a property market perspective, we're just seeing the early signs of what could carry through for decades to come. So Parkes is one of literally dozens of regional locations that are strong agricultural precincts. Wagga Wagga is another one of those.
Yeah. You like Orange, Bathurst, Dubbo and Armidale, all for the same reasons?
Largely, yes. Okay. Launceston is really the high-quality food bowl of all of Australia. It's got arguably the best quality produce in the entire world, I would say.
Very good sparkling wine.
Very good sparkling wine. Great steak too. It's a tourism thing, as I said earlier, Brooke.
Yep.
Places like Bendigo and Ballarat, I think, get understated for tourism. It's their gold rush. There's a lot of history there. There's a lot of fantastic experiences that people can have, and people are combining winery experiences and food experiences with some architectural experiences as they travel to parts of regional Australia. Can we
talk Queensland specifically? We can switch over to the Queensland graphic. There were a couple of others mentioned. So Sunshine Coast, Mackay, Townsville, Rockhampton, Cairns and Toowoomba are some of the ones mentioned. So Townsville's added just there. Townsville, you've got a story around the vacancy rates there. What's that one in particular for investors as a point of interest?
Townsville's one of many markets that struggled for a long time. In fact, all of Queensland has done nothing from a property perspective since 2007. Largely flat for most of that period of time. Townsville's probably been one of the worst affected, but vacancy rates got to about 4.5% a couple of years back.
I haven't got a graphic for this one. I don't know if it's in there, but yeah, you can. It's actually quite a dramatic graphic, right?
It's a big drop. They're down to a bit below 2%. The market itself is still flat. Yeah. But there's been a lot of improvement in the Townsville market. I'm not just singling out Townsville. There's lots of Townsvilles out there. But when we look at the things that affect employment that haven't occurred yet, infrastructure projects, what businesses are doing, how operations are expanding, whether it's mining, whether it's agriculture, whether it's tourism, there's a lot of exciting stuff that's bubbling away under the system. Now, that's not all going to hit the market in 2019, but we want sustainable growth. So Townsville is one of literally dozens of locations throughout Australia that, don't be surprised, we might be talking 2020, 2021, and we could be talking double-digit price growth. Now, that's boom.
Okay,
that's
so Townsville and who potentially else? A couple more names?
The fundamentals of Cairns are as good as any location in Australia. Actually surprised that Cairns hasn't done much before now, but it has to at some time soon.
Okay. Key takeaway in 10 seconds or less for investors thinking about the property market in 2019?
Focus on the economic stuff. The property-specific data is the rear vision mirror things. You need to get an understanding of what's bubbling along behind the scenes, and there's lots of positive economic stories. Property market's got an exciting time ahead.
Okay, there you go. It's another view. We promised it. Thank you so much, Simon from Propertyology. Appreciate that here on Your Money Live.